everybody, welcome to the Glass House. Today we're hopping into an episode on loneliness. We've been walking through the emotions, and this is a universal feeling. Everybody has it.
I don't think people talk about it very much, though.
What do you mean?
Well, I'll explain. We are moving kids out of our home, pretty quickly. They're going to college. And I have met with so many moms who are like, this is way harder than I thought. Like the element of releasing a child and the loneliness it brings. And I'll give an example. I was talking to a woman recently, and she has 2 kids. She had twins that left. She has another son still at home. And she just said it's been very, very hard because the friendships that we establish as parents, oftentimes are related to our children. And so when our kids leave, it kind of leaves a loneliness of both friendship and having these kids in your house. And, I just think about that in the Glass House when you're already juggling all these things and what do people feel about our church and what do people whatever. And then as you have your own battles of, goodness, sometimes I'm lonely because I don't know who to trust. But then when my family begins to naturally fly the nest as you're supposed to do, it's really hard.
Yeah. Loneliness comes in so many different forms.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, there's that. Watching your kids fly the coop and feeling their absence. But, I always thought before we got married that marriage solves loneliness. And I actually came across this interview with Rich Mullins. If I have one question for God in heaven, it's why did you let Rich go so soon? But he got engaged sometime between the late 70s and early 80s, and he wrote a song about it called Doubly Good to You. And it was for his upcoming wedding. And Amy Grant recorded the song. It's called Straight Ahead. And there was all this excitement about Rich Mullins is getting married, but his fiance broke off the engagement. And in an interview with Mullins, this is what he said. These are his words. I would always be frustrated in that relationship with all those relationships. Even when I was engaged, I always struggled with relationships. I had a 10-year thing with this girl, and I would often wonder why. Even in those most intimate moments of a relationship, I would still feel really lonely. And it was just a few years ago that I finally realized that friendship is not a remedy for loneliness. Loneliness is a part of the human experience, and if we're looking for relief from loneliness and friendship, we're only going to frustrate the friendship.
Wait, say that again. If you're looking.
Loneliness is a part of the human experience, and if we are looking for relief from loneliness in friendship, we are only going to frustrate the friendship. And this is the last line. Friendship, camaraderie, intimacy, all those things, and loneliness live together in the same experience. That's pretty profound. For a guy who's single, never got married, to come to the realization that no matter how close you feel to your spouse, they're never going to be able to fill that full bucket of intimacy. That's where longing lives, and our longing for heaven. And so I just think this conversation with Kenny is really important, and Kenny does a great job. Let me tell you about Kenny before we hop in. Kenny is a counselor here in Nashville area. He's worked with couples for decades on how to become more connected. He co-wrote a book with a very famous woman named Sue Johnson, who's now gone to be with the Lord, but the book's called Created for Connection. And it's really about helping couples reestablish a close connection. And before we hop into that, I just want to say a quick word about this Together study that I put together. One of the lessons that is in the study for people to talk through is how do you be there, like truly be there for the people around you. And we look at some key moments in people's lives. It's the ups, the downs, and the transitions, which we've talked about somewhat on this, where there's these key moments that if you're not there for a person, they feel like it was traumatic. And we don't do enough thinking as Christians about how we can show up for people in key moments of their lives. And so there was this whole week of study that we did in Together about that, about how small groups can begin to think about how do we really be there for one another. So I just want to continue to give you all a good word about the study that's coming out. I'm really proud of it. It's called Together. You can find it on lifeway.com, and I hope you'll check it out. But anyway, we're going to hop in with Kenny, and I can't wait for you to hear what he has to say about loneliness. Hey everyone, we're back on the Glass House exploring emotions this season. And this one today, Lynley, is something that you and I both experienced a lot.
So we're talking about loneliness. And I think what has been most surprising to me as I've gotten older is that I really thought by my age I would never experience loneliness.
Yep.
Like I just thought man, I mean, if I have this many friends in my 20s and 30s, then by 40s. But we've actually entered into a new season. So our family, I'll tell you a little background. 2 of our kids are in college, and then we have a junior and a senior in high school. Well, they're both driving. They both have their own vehicles. So they're gone all the time. They work, they're with friends, they're doing sports. And so we're not empty nesters. So we feel kind of like we have to be there sometimes, but then we don't actually have to be there because they're never home.
Yeah.
And so there are times, and Ben travels some, and so there are times where I experience this heavy loneliness that I was not prepared for, because I think, well, I should call a friend, but what if they come home? So that has surprised me a little bit about getting older.
The transition. Yeah.
And I think just being in pastoral ministry, I mean, the temptation of people in ministry is to say no one understands what it's like.
Yeah.
No one knows how it feels to be the pastor or the pastor's wife.
Yeah.
And when you start to have that self-talk of nobody gets me, no one understands me, I'm all alone, it's scary.
Yeah, it is.
So you seem to be somebody that's thought a lot about this. You've been a part of writing a book called Created for Connection.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about why you wrote that book and why loneliness has been something you've explored.
Well, I wrote the book. Well, first of all, I'd say I'd have to acknowledge the fact that Dr. Sue Johnson, she's this incredible person, and God put us together, and she invited me to be she mentored me. Actually, she's the world's #1 marital therapist researcher in the world. And she just opened my mind. The model that she has based on bonding science just opened my mind to so many things. Some of the things you're talking about now, like feelings that I maybe had but didn't even have language for in the past, but now it's become more poignant, and I find language for. And to make sense of what those emotions really are telling us, and which ones do we listen to and which ones we don't. As people of faith, that's a challenge sometimes, because we're sort of told that, don't listen to them. They could lead you astray. And then that's true, because there's some emotions, right, that are not adaptive. They don't serve a real adaptive purpose at all. When I say that, I mean it's a highly attuned, engineered system that God's given us, a warning system that lets us know that something isn't right. If we listen to those deep core emotions, they not only give us a sense of direction of what to do, but it also, when we reach out to others, it draws people to us. Okay, so that's the first thing. Is just to recognize that they are real and they're there for a reason. And what are they telling us? And then what do we do with them?
Yeah.
So, isolation's a big thing. Loneliness is probably the worst thing that can happen, really. It's the most painful of all emotions.
Really?
And actually, the word itself is just a description for a physical sort of a manifestation that we have. And you're talking about, losing what we used the term social capital, where our world has changed.
I wanted to ask you about that, because there was this book that came out a long time ago called Bowling Alone.
Yeah, doesn't that sound like a fun book to read?
Yeah, and it was about the death of bowling leagues and how this was an indication of where society was going, and that people no longer valued getting together for the sake of fellowship. They were isolating.
Yeah.
And in your book, you guys point out very clearly that our culture has not helped us, and that it's pushing us toward isolation.
It's worse since we wrote the book, actually.
Talk about that.
Because of COVID. Well, I mean, the thing is this: what our social capital really is. It's like our most precious relationships, our family relationships, our community, our village. We've lost that. We've lost our childhood friends. We didn't maybe lose them, but they're just not. They're not near us anymore. They're not reachable like they would be if we were still in that community. So that's a real reality. I give you a real crazy example. I was a missionary to West Africa. When I'd go in the village in the mornings, I would greet everybody and say, Buna Morali. And it said, how did we sleep last night? It wasn't how you slept. And everybody would kind of click. And the eldest in the hut would scratch his whiskers and say, we slept in peace. We've lost our we, really. And that's really difficult. And we can lose that also. We can find a sense of loneliness like you're talking about in a crowd. It's that kind of lonely.
Yeah.
Do you find that to be more prevalent in American culture versus other cultures? Because I just read about this somewhere because it's talking about the newness of kids who have graduated from college coming back to live at home and how surprising that is because of cost of living and stuff like that. Whereas in other cultures, grandparents live there, aunts and uncles, they all live together. Mm-hmm. So how did this happen? Like, how did Americans get to this place to where, I mean, you graduate, you go, and you never come home again?
That's a great question. And I think the answer to that is one in which we value, our culture values autonomy and independence. But our culture teaches us that we separate ourselves from others to find it. We have to go out there. Bonding science and what many people in the world know relationally that have been able to hold their social capital together here is that we become more autonomous and more independent on the backside of safe connection. So when we're connected, we can go off and we can come back. You're describing that with your teens, right? You're a safe base now.
Yeah.
They go off. That's transition. It's transition for them. That's what you raised them to do, is to move out. But they can move so far and they come back. And when they're little, it may be 3 feet.
That's right.
Yeah.
When it's 16, they're going to move off. But they still have you in their heart, okay? And they come back. But then you've got this role that you had in this relationship with that, and you're sort of at the mercy of when they're going to come back and when they're not. And right? And then you're struggling like, well, how do I develop new ones or whatever? This is just so much transition here. It's so normal, really.
I wanted to ask you about the hold me tight relationship that you guys describe in the book, about how we, by human nature, we have this overpowering hunger for at least one hold me tight relationship.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by this. I guess like many people didn't necessarily have someone that was like that in my life, except for in a consistent way, except for one person who was my great aunt, who was in her 80s, okay? And she had a way of looking at, she raised me really. She's impacted me. I mean, I am who I am more from my relationships with her. She couldn't read. She couldn't write. I mean, we made soap. And right, we were so poor. She could look at me in a way that I knew she saw the good in me, right? And when I saw that, I looked at her, her eyes reflected back to me through her glasses, which, by the way, she'd breathe on them and rub them with her hand to get them clean. Okay? When she looked at me, no matter what was going on inside of me as a little kid, I knew I was okay.
Wow.
Okay, so she was the person. She was my rock. She is the person that actually, as I got older, allowed me to see God that way. Right, to be able to look in His eyes and to see that reflection, because I'd experienced that kind of love with her. So that's what we all long for, and what we're really crying out for is, if I cry out to you, I mean the important people in your life, and we can talk about relationships, marital relationships in specific. If I call out to you, are you accessible? Are you responsive to me and emotionally engaged with me? And if you are, then that's what we call it a bonding moment, actually. So for so many years, we thought relationships were just a bargain, but they're a bond. It's really a bond, our bond with others and bond with God. And so, gosh, the scriptures are just full of examples of where Jesus was always accessible, responsive, emotionally engaged. And what we long for is that. And when the people in our life, when we cry out and they're not, we can miss each other, then there is an alarm that goes off. It could be lonely, it could be isolation, it could be a panic, actually, that says, hey, proximity, this about a proximity seeking emotionally. Hey, this is a valuable person. You need to reach for them. You need to reach out to them. You need to correct. Maybe we need to repair here. And that alarm is in our brain. God gave it to us. We can't disconnect it. And it's there for a good purpose.
That's really good.
So, I see a female therapist on occasion, and she taught me about R, because accessible, responsive, and emotionally engaged. And I had a hard time understanding that. And so she even used the example of a grocery store clerk. She said, you know, they're accessible. Like, you can ask them a question, they're going to respond, but they're not emotionally available to you, you know. And so that was a good explanation of how that E is just so important to relationships.
Well, that made me think about the season we went through, which we've talked about on this podcast. When I first got to Lifeway and a lot of hard things happened all at once, my mind became so focused on saving this company that my eyes for her vanished. And she began to feel, I thought it was very extreme, but she called it abandoned. And I was very offended by that because I was coming home every night. We were still eating dinner. I was still there. I wasn't leaving. I was still telling her I loved her. But she felt emotionally completely cut off from me. And I didn't have this language then that I have now in terms of, it's more than just proximity and sharing a bed in a house. It's about the way you look at each other.
Well, and that's the loneliness. I mean, you can share a house with somebody and be very lonely with them.
And not look in their eyes and see any love. I think it's interesting that the thing that made you feel most secure was just simply her eyes.
Her eyes. Everything is around our eyes, actually. Every emotion is showed up around our eyes. Across all cultures, even those who are visually impaired and deaf.
Really?
Whenever you're visiting with someone, that's where we pick it up. So eyes is important, and there's mirror neurons too. So that's what empathy is. When I could sit here and listen to you talk about your loneliness, and you know my mind could be wandering off to all kind of things. Right?
Yeah.
But how do you know that I'm paying attention to you? How do you feel heard and safe and understood? It's because we thought our mirror neurons in our brain were limited to our brain. We know now that when I look in your eyes, what you're feeling registers in my brain. I feel. Literal empathy is feeling with you. Okay?
So recently I was with someone and I told Ben her smile doesn't reach her eyes. She's smiling, but it's not reaching her eyes. Her eyes don't. She looks sad to me.
Yeah.
So I was right.
You were right.
Interesting.
You know, I also think in 23 years of being married to you, and I love you to death. You know that. You're the sweetest thing that's ever happened to me.
No, I'm not.
But there are times when you and I are in an intense conversation. It happens on both sides.
Yep.
Where I'm trying to tell you something. I just want you to feel with me. And I can already tell in your mind you're forming a response. Or you're feeling afraid of what I'm feeling. And so now I'm feeling ashamed of how I'm feeling. So that piece right there, Kenny, is really what you train couples to do better, right?
Yeah, to be aware of those patterns. What are our protective strategies? Okay. So my aunt, she lit me up. I mean, I experienced that, right? But my goodness, how many people I have interactions with and other people in my life that let me down. And so the more that happens, and it's like, gosh, to reach is risky, and then and to risk them not responding back to me makes it worse. So then we create these ways of protecting ourselves from our vulnerability and being hurt again. And typically, I don't know your cycle. Everybody has a cycle, but typically it lines up where somebody, that alarm goes off in their head, and when it does, they verbalize it. And they communicate it, and there's a sense of urgency, and like, we need to address it now. And why can't you hear me? Why can't you? I mean, don't you care about me? Right? It can sort of build an intensity. And typically, the other half of the world, in those situations when there's this expectation, right, to be vulnerable back and to take and risk, they lose total access of everything that's going on in their mind. If you pressure me to where are we? Why did you say that? What is going on with you? They just cannot even. Their mind is able to have enough clarity to respond. You know, like asking them to do the hardest thing in the world. So everybody in the world and it's in a relationship has a cycle, and it's some derivative of what I just shared, where one sort of pushes, brings it up, one sense of urgency, and the other one sort of like, why do we have to bring that up? Is it that big a deal? I mean, why are you starting this problem? Why do you bring these things up? Are you trying to create problems? I mean, that's the dance. I've seen it for 25 years.
Well, and that's a big part of our marriage, because Lynley's always the most courageous to bring it up. Almost every time. You have the bravery to say, we have a problem.
And then he says, and by the way, I have a problem with you as well.
Yeah,
So then
That's
we...
normally my cue to say, okay, well, since you brought this up, I've got a list on my
Yeah, sure.
on my mind too. But
absolutely.
so catch us in the act here for a second. She's brought something to me. I'm feeling very defensive. I'm wondering why she wants to keep pulling in the past. When are we going to be free of the past? So I'm on guard. What do I do different next time?
I think it would start. For me to tell you what to do the next time, you wouldn't be able to do it. Because it's going to be like trying to read a parachute manual when you're free falling at 5,000.
Okay, so I'm a lost cause. That's what you're saying.
No, but, because your alarm's on.
Yeah.
Okay? And your alarm on, you love her. I mean, would you have this problem with anybody else?
No.
You love her. That's being vulnerable. That's risky. You love each other. Love is risky. And so then to be vulnerable or to bring up something or that you're not happy, oh my gosh, I love her. I want her to be happy. And so what have I done to maybe create this that she's not happy? And we can take it personal. We can be defensive and say, well, I may have blown that, but my gosh, I'm a good guy. I mean, I do this and this and this, right?
Yeah. I've done that.
You hear that dance? Yeah, so you're just protecting yourself. You're protecting yourself. And what you're saying is, I'm hurt too, right? And so to be able to slow that down, which takes a while, and be able to understand underneath the positions that I have in this relationship, which is I tend to just sort of be a duck going across the water, and, my feet may be paddling underneath, but you wouldn't know it. I've kind of got it, and I'm very, very okay with just being present and having that kind of conversation. And then in the face of this expectation that you would want something different from me, that your alarm goes off. You're going to protect yourself, and you would like to know that you haven't hurt her or that you haven't let her down.
Yeah.
And when we're aware of that, that's just the very first step, believe me, of a bunch of the other conversations that we all need to have. But that's a big one.
Just being aware that my reflex is going to be to protect myself because I really care about her.
If you didn't care about her, you wouldn't have that kind. Somebody else could walk up to you and speak to you, and you're just going to be, okay, I can take it. You can have clarity. You're not going to get defensive. You can be open. Right? If you care this much, you can only get hurt this much.
You talked about how he can't change it in a moment because we're already, pretty actively upset. So if I bring something up and he becomes defensive, like, how do you suggest that? Because my personality is then to one up the situation.
Oh,
but
yeah.
what do you say to couples?
Any response is better than no response, isn't it?
Well, that's what I feel.
That's right.
But is no response better? Is walking away what do you say to people?
Here's what you're aware of. We're creating this together. In every attempt to try to get close and to be heard and understood and loved and feel cared for, we get caught in this cycle. And so, and here's what we do. If you could just be still, and you may not be able to, you might have to revisit and say, okay, here's where we just got into it. Okay, here's our pattern, here's our cycle. I had my feelings hurt, or I felt like you didn't really sort of take in what I was saying a while ago, maybe at the surface level, but I really wanted you to hear it. It was important for me to hear it, and you didn't hear it. Right? And then you're able to say, okay, well, I can hear it. I can be more likely to take that in. Say if it's lonely, like I found myself lonely today, right? And you be able to turn to him, actually, so that he could be a source of comfort for you, right? But what happens most of the time in cycles is it's an invitation. Okay, help me if that doesn't fit with you.
Yeah.
I'm inviting you to come help me with this feeling. I don't like feeling this way. Or can you please comfort me here? I don't like feeling this way. But it sounds like an invitation ends up feeling like an accusation.
Yes.
And it's an accusation, so now I'm going to get defensive. I'm going to prepare myself okay, well, you think you got it bad. Well, I can think of a whole lot of things.
I've got it bad too.
Yeah, all right. And then it goes up a notch, depends on how it goes. It goes up another notch, and then you just,
I'll give you a perfect example of that.
Okay, go ahead. But then I have a question.
Recently, Lynley was feeling fear that our kids are not getting enough devotional life,
Yeah.
not enough like discussion about God, spirituality, Jesus. And she was sharing it with me, and I felt like what she was saying is, you're a really bad spiritual leader in this home.
Mm.
That's what my ears heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt accused.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started defending myself and I had a whole line of defense about why she was wrong about that. And this, I think, is one of our cycles in terms of recognizing she's feeling an emotion, she brings it to me, and it normally turns into an accusation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing
It's translated into it. You have a tape that runs in your head
Yes.
that says, oh no, she thinks I failed somehow. Right? That's what it's coming. It doesn't sound like to you that she's saying, I need you to comfort. I need comfort here. And by the way, you may not be saying you need comfort here. So you're talking about the homey type conversation.
Yeah.
That's kind of at the end here where you break out of this cycle and you're able to say, look, babe, for whatever reason today, I just had my kids on my heart and I'm just sort of heartbroken, and I get scared because, they're not as close as they were, and the world isn't like it. Isn't so safe out there. What are they getting exposed to? And I wonder if they're getting, if they're into Word. I wonder what kind of where are they spiritually and that kind of thing. And I'm really scared, and that really, that just came up for me today. And how could you reach and say what I need from you? I think it's just like, can you hear me here? Can you comfort me? Can you?
That's exactly, that's exactly how I was feeling.
Yeah. He said it in a way that I could receive it, though.
I know.
I do think there's challenges on both sides. I do think your tone sometimes scares me.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I think I have to stop.
Yeah, because this we're finding language right now for it, okay?
Right.
But most of it isn't language at all. You can just look. You tell me you can't look at her sometimes and think, oh heck, something's going on. I wonder if it's me. Huh?
Oh, every day.
Okay.
Would you stop? Gosh, you now.
No.
Lynley's confrontable, whatever. Do you have some flaws?
Hold on a second.
Okay.
I'm sitting here saying there's a tape running in my head
Yeah.
of shame,
Yeah.
which is it's completely healthy, human, and fair for you to feel scared. But whatever tone you're bringing, I really think I do. I turn that up in my own head louder.
Yeah. That's what I guess I was responding to, not the words, but the tone. Okay. Even the tone. Okay. So if you think about it relationally, our first 18 months of our life was very important for us as far as our emotion, how we interacted with others, whether we feel safe and whatever. It was nonverbal. But we could read people and we can listen to their tone. So that's where it gets so confusing in relationships, because sometimes we can be sitting here talking in seems like the most articulate way, but yet if the way you just tilted your head like that could be a trigger that, oh no, you're not. You hear what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Or you could be just sitting here and looking and just thinking, okay, maybe she doesn't, maybe I missed something today, or maybe, or why would she want to bring, I bet she wants to bring something up. Gosh, we're having such a great evening. Do we really want to, do we really want that to happen? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you might change the subject, you might move in a different way.
Yeah.
That's the dance.
Well, it is a dance. I think I could tell by your facial expression, you were feeling attacked right there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you give examples, you often say, Lynley confronts this. Lynley, you're a fighter too.
For sure.
So I think that's what's the dance in the cycle, is that maybe I was ready for you to confess your side of that too. But I want to move on.
Okay.
Because I do have a question.
Yeah.
So like I just said, we are both confrontational people, feisty people. I would bet that that we're pretty odd, actually, because I have a lot of girlfriends who are very non-confrontational. They are scared of fear. And so I would love for you to talk about the couple, the pastoral couple, where they're lonely, but they're scared to confront like, how do you even walk couples through that when you're counseling them and there's all this deep down resentment because they don't feel like they have the ear?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two sides. One could be that somebody, there's so many different answers to that, but well, say you have a pastor's wife who was passionate and persistent early in the relationship and articulated in the clearest ways her needs weren't being met, or that when something came up, brought it up. And like, I want to know who you are. Like, can you come out and be with me? Really wanting to connect at deeper levels. And then them getting in a cycle and not being able to accomplish that. So it's something like, almost like you knock on the door of somebody's heart until your knuckles are bleeding, and then you begin to grieve the loss of it not ever happening, and you learn to settle, okay? Or you get out, So the other deal is that then you just maybe you grew up where anger was not something you ever heard or was something you ever experienced. And so what last thing you'd ever want to do is to come off pushy or shovey or angry. Or you grew up in a household where that's the only emotion that was expressed.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do whatever I can do to avoid that one. That's catastrophic. So it's a kind of a complex thing, but it all boils down to this. How can we be vulnerable? How can we say, man, that hurt, I mean, my wife tells me this has helped a lot. I'm sitting there talking this now. Believe me, I got a cycle. I can still I wrote a book about all this, right? But I can still get in the cycle.
For sure.
I know when it comes out of my mouth how it's going to land, and it still comes out of my mouth.
It's a whole lot easier to teach us how to do it than to do it
my
yourself.
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So, but what she says to me now and said to me recently, I'm angry. I don't like feeling this way. Could you help me? And something about that sort of got me off of the place that you're talking about here, like, I did it. I'm the source of it. Or why would she be angry over that? Right where my mind would take me. Sort of my panic that would take over. And that helps me to be able to say, hey, yeah, hey, let's talk about it. How can I help you? Tell me what happened. And yeah.
You just described a fork in the road for a person, and both of them felt to me really scary. One would be, I'm just going to settle for no intimacy, or I'm going to get out, which is often very complicated when you're thinking about kids and family. We have friends,
and ministry.
We have friends who are there. And how do you help that person who's feeling that level of terror that I'm trapped?
Yeah, they need help. They need help. Reach out for help. Here's what happens in our circles, okay? We end up a lot of times, and I've worked with a lot of pastors over the years, end up with what I call a morally managed coexistence. That is such a sad place to be, actually. It's a morally managed coexistence. Like, we're stuck. We've climbed this mountain. We've kind of lost our love or this safe connection that we once had with each other. I mean, gosh, we got this higher calling. We have people pulling from us nonstop. We don't have the energy to even deal with our own stuff. And we just get to a place where we just have sort of a morally managed coexistence. We're going to stay married because we just believe in the sanctity of marriage. We love God. We're going to serve God parallel to each other here. But it's at the terrible cost of the divine essence of God's love being blocked, flowing between you. And that's sad for me. Yeah. If you want to say, why did you write the book? I would say that's why I wrote the book.
There's two kinds of couples.
That was one of the motivations, yeah.
There's two kinds of couples that Lynley and I have been around recently and had conversation about. There was a couple we were around the other day, an older couple, that they speak to each other in such harsh tones that it's hard to be around them because you could tell there's not a lot of love flowing between them. And then we were at a restaurant the other day. There were two older couples sitting down with their food, saying absolutely nothing to each other.
Well, that's because we were at a meet and three.
But
so
Lynley and I looked at
the
them both
youngest
and we
people.
thought, that's terrifying to think about a season of life where you are sitting in a
No,
restaurant.
I saw them and I was
what
like,
counselors do sometimes. So when's the last time you had a date night, right? When did you go off and
Right.
just have time? And so people are really stuck in their cycle and conflicted, you're asking them to go out and fight in public?
Right.
Or you're asking them to sit across the table from each other and just live realizing everybody around us is talking and we can't even have a conversation.
And if we do, it's going to explode.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Oh, man.
that's really interesting because the number one thing you read on the internet is if your relationship is in trouble, you need to go on a date.
Yeah.
Which may be the
Well,
worst
I
thing.
mean, if you're not stuck in a rigid pattern and you
Right.
you whatever, but I mean, it's not going to change your relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Well, why don't you share just a couple of principles in the book? Would you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Like for those who maybe would go out and get the book, give them a reason to buy it. What are some of the things that you and Sue teach in there about how to restore that connection that we so desperately want?
Well, the model that Sue came up with real shortly, it's the only marital model that has research in it. It's APA, American Psychology Association, gold standard for research. 7 out of 10 couples get well, and 9 out of 10 are improved. That was from our research. So she went through all the conversations and all these tapes that she's seen over the years with this therapy, to do therapy, and she came up with the 7 conversations that those couples learned to navigate to get to that place, because he knew that not everybody's going to go to therapy, not everybody can afford therapy, whatever. So that was the reason for the book. So that's those 7 conversations, and one builds on the other. And we do these in small group curriculum. It's small group curriculum. We do it in group. We've got research on its efficacy in the U.S. and in Europe. If you have a heart attack in Finland, this is a wild thing. If you have a heart attack in Finland, you're required to do an online course that we have in Finland for couples. Why? Because they realized that when they interviewed couples that someone had a heart attack, and they said, is your spouse a source of comfort for you? And can you turn to them? Or do you have a connection with them? And the answer was no. The chances of having a second heart attack will increase by 2-fold.
Wow.
So people go online and take this marital enrichment source because it impacts your body. Yeah. So that's the deal, because here's the thing. We think that we're individuals and we're independents, and God made us in a way that our nervous systems were not made to live alone. And things fall apart when they do.
That is fascinating. It has a bodily result when your soul is not being tended to.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting the other day I was in Scripture about how the Holy Spirit is referred to as the Comforter.
Yeah.
And that's why a relationship with God that's real is so enriching, because you're receiving comfort, and so you can comfort others.
Yeah.
In the book of Acts, the first deacons were chosen because they were full of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
They were full of the Comforter.
Mm-hmm.
And so how often do we miss just the role of being a safe, comforting place for the person we live with?
2 words: curiosity and comfort will change any relationship.
Interesting.
If you can lean in, when everything in you is saying, "Oh my gosh, what does this mean? How does this person see me, or what's going on?" And lean in and be curious and ask for more. Tell me more. And that's a huge thing. And to realize that our job is to comfort each other, not to take away the pain or change the situation that caused the pain, but to be a source of comfort. And so then we're facing life. We're slaying our dragons together. I'm not slaying mine by myself, and I'm not slaying, you're not slaying yours by myself. That we actually come together and we're slaying those dragons together. That's oneness. That's the original design. I believe that with all my heart.
We've gone through seasons where we went through really hard things, but we did it together. And those were actually, now as I look back, some of the best things that happened to us as a couple, because it drew us together. And there's been seasons the opposite, where we weren't together and the opposite happened.
Oh yeah.
Where we actually started to resent each other.
I've got to tell you a story. So I was on this project when I was missionary. I was an agriculture missionary, and everything's slow in the third world, right? And the chief that I was working with could tell I was frustrated. I mean, everything in the world was just, I was just like, the American in me was like, man, this
You're
is,
right. In those countries, everything moves like a snail.
And he looked at me and he said the most powerful thing I've ever heard. He said, Kenny, it's not the elephants that get you in life, it's the mice. I think that's true in relationships. Sometimes we can come together in big things, okay? But it's the little things. Or it's the accumulation of little things
Yeah.
that build and build and build, and then they come out in a big way that feels unreasonable and unrealistic. And why in the world would I, me just leaving my coffee cup out here on the table, not putting it in the dishwasher? How in the world could that get that kind of response from you? I could have 1,000 researchers, but it wasn't about the cup. It was about a bunch of other things that happened along the way. Where my wife, I can assure you, didn't feel that I didn't feel appreciated or acknowledged that the part she plays in our life and all the moving parts and everything. And then I come in and don't do that. It's not about the cup. That cup just represents the last. It's like trigger stacking. It was the last trigger. Boom. I'm like, holy, why in the world would that right there get this big reaction? I'm like, come on. Then I get defensive, like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But what we don't know, for those of us who are more on the withdrawn side, which I think you and I can are brothers here in that.
I love to withdraw.
Is the deal here is this, that we don't realize how many times our spouses don't bring things up.
Amen.
Yeah.
I like where you're going here.
Yeah, we do not know, right? And what pursuers don't understand is when they say, well, what do you feel? Or what do you think about that? Or, aren't you going to say something? And we say, I don't know. It's like, how could you not know? I don't know is an answer. Sometimes when we, as withdrawers, get flooded and get caught, we're caught between wanting to react and not wanting to react and being defensive and get angry and defend ourselves, and then not being able to find another path to be able to find words for what's coming up.
Wait, so you're saying it's okay to say, I don't know?
Yeah.
It's okay to say I don't know, because a lot of times that's a true answer.
I
really
flooded.
don't know. But
Really?
that isn't the end of the story. We need to come back and feel safe enough to work. We have to feel safe enough to feel.
I feel like I've never said I don't know before. Because I
No,
kind of
no, you-
always feel that. And so he has said that to me before sometimes. And I'm like, how do you not know? Like, how can you not know what I'm asking you? And he's like, I don't know. And so then I'm like, do I matter at all? Like,
Yeah.
so it triggers that.
Yeah.
Well, the crazy thing about that is the initial reaction on her part might be was he doesn't have any thoughts. It's actually the opposite. I have so many thoughts. I cannot
Yeah.
clearly articulate
No, it's
which
like
ones I believe are true.
You help me. It's like a Rolodex.
Yeah.
I said this in the past. I've said this here. I said that. This situation, right? Gather like you're going to gather the data and put it together so that you can come out with a response. But if you're sitting with someone that doesn't know that's what's going on in you, it looks like you're flatlining. You're not paying attention. And how could you not respond to me when this is so important to me?
There was a guy that used to work here named Brad who said that he believed that a thought unexpressed is a wasted one. And I think Lynley's family is good at expressing thoughts. I think your family can be very vocal, loud, volatile, which is a blessing and a curse. I come from a family where we don't express a lot of thoughts or a lot of feelings. We kind of hold it all in. And so the collision of that in marriage has been that she is often vocal. I'm often flooded with feelings.
Yeah.
And if I'm not careful, I just kind of hunker down and keep withdrawing.
Or go off and devote yourself to things, to work and things where you feel like appreciated and that you're confident you're accomplishing things.
Where I have clarity.
And that's what happens in ministry.
He wasn't saying clarity, were you? You were saying accomplishment.
Yeah.
Well, but
acquiring-
you're accomplishing because you have clear thinking there.
Oh, you have clear thinking there
Yeah.
because you don't. It's a whole different world. Now it's doing. It's right. It doesn't require you being.
It's true.
So what's the follow-up to I don't know? Like, what is a person who says I don't know?
I don't know right now. Right now, I can't give you an answer. I don't know. Can we revisit this? Can we come back and revisit this?
Can I have some time to think?
This is the place when I know you need an answer so bad. And that's part of the reason I can't answer you, because I feel so much pressure and my mind is thinking of all these things. And so can we come back and revisit this?
Okay. That's good. I like the second part.
Mm-hmm.
Is your wife a withdrawer, or is she
She's more of a pursuer. Yeah.
a pursuer? I like that word.
Pursuers, there's pursuers and withdrawers. Oh,
Yeah.
I wish I was a pursuer.
Or with some of it is withdrawal. Some people are withdrawal. I mean, there's different, but it's all the derivative of that.
I think the most comforting thing for listeners is to hear a person in your position that says, "My wife and I still have these cycles."
Oh, I'll be the first to tell that.
So
I
helpful.
don't hear that very often, and
Yeah.
so it's helpful to know. I mean, even
But here's the thing, okay? So life is about order, disorder, reorder, okay? Order, disorder, reorder. Relationships are about order, disorder, reorder. The disorder are imitations for intimacy. If we didn't get stuck along the way, and we didn't have to have hard conversations, which required us to be vulnerable, we would never grow deeper with each other.
Yeah. That's
So
why the absence of conflict is not intimacy.
It's not. It's not at all.
when people come to you and say they never fight, do you believe them?
When they say never fight, they're probably saying we never like banter back and forth. But internally, I don't know if they're fighting. Fighting might be a secondary emotion to something they're feeling deep down, but they're very alone, and that's why they're there. That's what I would hear.
So you don't hear that as healthy if people say we just don't fight.
Oh, I would not think that would be
Typically.
typical.
All right.
Well, we've got just a minute left here. How can folks, if they've really been touched by what you've said today, how can they go further in studying what you're talking about? What do you got out there?
Well, I've got a new an online program now.
Okay.
That Sue developed. Took 3 years. The military, the Army uses it. Chaplains use it because they can do it deployed. So for busy people in ministry, people who cannot, because of confidentiality and the word getting out in town that I got the pastor and his wife are having trouble. All those kind of things that are, are a reality there. Yeah. They can do it online. And it took 3 years for her to put it. It is like this book on steroids, and it was incredibly done. I revised it, made it faith friendly. And it links up with Created for Connection to integrate the faith. And that's a big deal I want.
Cool. Where do they find it?
It's on createdforconnectiononline.com.
Createdforconnectiononline.com.
And the other use, and I got a lot of pastors right now, I'm training them. Well, we have a 10 one-hour training program with ICCI out of Dallas, where if a pastor wants in rural communities where there are no mental health facilities or help or whatever, they want to do marital counseling because everybody comes to them, then they can take a 10-hour course on how to facilitate that. They give them the book, they give them the course, and then how to process that, how to know when they're in over their head. And then we're going to offer actually consult groups for pastors, marital mentors, or whatever to call in, and we can help them so they're not alone in that.
Wow.
Do you have one piece of advice or one piece of scripture, one saying that has always stuck with you? It's kind of like the thing you say to people.
I was on the list.
Okay.
And if you'd asked me in any other season in my life, I may answer it different. But I just lost Sue, in May. And so you could Google all the many things that she said. Okay, there's a whole website of things she said. But the one thing she said to me one time that really stuck with me, not only personally, not only professionally, but personally, and it sounds so simple, it sounds silly. It was just no risky, no giddy.
No risky?
No risky, no giddy.
No giddy.
In relationships. If we don't risk, if we're worried about risking and not getting it, we're already toast because we're not getting it. So no risky, no giddy.
I had a guy right out here at the coffee machine the other day say something to me very similar. He said, someone taught him that every great conversation requires risk.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a really good thing. Like somebody's exposing a piece of their heart, and it's dangerous to do that.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that, you don't get to the sweet spot of intimacy.
And then I know we're short on time, but I'm going to say, look at the scriptures and look at how Jesus responded to people. He's always accessible, responsive, emotionally engaged. And who got his attention? Wouldn't the energy flow from him? It was people who took a huge risk in a social setting, like the woman with the issue of blood, who stood so much to lose. And she reached and she touched him, okay? And he always responds to vulnerability.
Yeah. Kenny, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
Man, you're a well of wisdom. It's been a good day.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like I need to go process. Well, this has been already an awesome season talking about emotions. I hope this on loneliness has helped you, and you can check out Kenny's tools, and we're so glad you're here, and we look forward to hearing you on the next show, being with you on the next show. The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard, show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden, photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley, recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.